At the family reunion, my dad announced, "I'd rather be homeless than accept a dime from you." My aunt gasped. My cousin whispered, "Did she really deserve that?" And I just sat there smiling. He had no idea I was the one funding his precious job offer. I, 43 female, was at this family reunion in Asheville, North Carolina when my dad, 68 male, loudly told everyone he'd rather be homeless than take a dime from someone like me. Everyone gasped. My cousin leaned over and whispered, "Did she really deserve that?" And I just sat there, sipping sweet tea, smiling, because he had no idea I was the one who got him that job he was so proud of. The job that helped pull him out of his post-retirement rut. I've stayed quiet about it until now, but here's the full story of why I did what I did, and how it all came to this one surreal moment. It started with an email from my cousin Marina. Subject line, family reunion. Let's heal heartsuit. That should have been my first red flag. I hadn't been back to North Carolina in years. Asheville, where the reunion was being held, was beautiful, cool mountain air, quaint brick buildings, and family memories I'd buried like fossils. But it was also a place where I'd been judged, pushed away, and eventually cut out of my father's life entirely. My father, Dennis, was once a respected local historian. Charming, articulate, but unyielding when it came to how the world should be, especially his world. He never forgave me for coming out. Or for leaving. I left at 25 and didn't look back. Moved to the Bay Area, built a life. First in tech startups, then into venture capital. Worked my dimwit off. Made money. Married a woman I loved. Divorced her after 8 years. And through it all, never got more than a birthday email from Dad, if that. But Marina's email stirred something in me. Maybe it was curiosity. Or boredom. Or maybe I just wanted to see if the past could ever truly stay in the past. I booked a flight. The family reunion was being held at Black Mountain Lodge, just off the Blue Ridge Parkway. A rustic little venue with a mountain view, picnic tables, and strings of lights that glowed like fireflies once the sun dipped behind the hills. The place was swarming with cousins, uncles, and aunts, some I hadn't seen in over a decade. People smiled awkwardly when they saw me, as if unsure which version of me they should greet. Naomi, my younger sister, was there too. She'd always been the peacekeeper of the family. She gave me a long hug and whispered, "I'm really glad you came." I believed her. I noticed Dad arrive from a distance. His gait was slower now, but his pride still practically walked in ahead of him. His salt and pepper hair was thinner, and there were deep grooves in his face that hadn't been there before. But the same tight expression sat on his mouth when he caught sight of me. He didn't say hello. I didn't expect him to. So I stayed in the periphery. Just watching. Making small talk with cousins, helping myself to the buffet spread, sipping sweet tea and pretending like this wasn't just a calculated social experiment I'd agreed to run on myself. Then Marina stood up on a wooden bench and clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "We've got something special to celebrate tonight," she said, smiling wide. "Uncle Dennis, would you come up here?" He looked surprised, even slightly embarrassed, but he walked to the front as people clapped. There was a small cake, some balloons, and a framed printout of what looked like a job offer. "Dennis has just accepted a consulting role with the Charleston Heritage Society," Marina announced. "They're launching a project to preserve Civil War landmarks. And they wanted our family's own historian to help lead it. Isn't that amazing?" Applause, cheers, someone even yelled, "Finally." I said nothing. Because I already knew. That offer didn't come from nowhere. I'd made a sizable donation to the Charleston Heritage Society 2 years ago, anonymously. Through work, I'd connected with one of their board members, an old college contact. When I heard they were looking for a Southern historian, I gave an unsolicited recommendation for one. I even helped fund the initial grant that would eventually be used to offer the role to someone like my father. No one there knew. Not even Marina. Only the executive director did. I'd made sure of that. It wasn't supposed to be a big thing. Just something to give my father a purpose, some dignity after retirement. I didn't want thanks. I didn't even want him to know. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would give him some joy. But then my cousin Isaac made a joke. "Wonder who threw money behind this gig," he said, raising a beer. "Hope it's someone here. We could all use a little family charity." People laughed. That's when my father's smile disappeared. He stepped forward, puffed up his chest, and said, loud and clear, "I'd rather be homeless than accept a dime from anyone in this family." The crowd went quiet. Dead quiet. My Aunt Loretta dropped her fork. My uncle's kid, Tyler, who'd been playing on his phone, looked up like someone had just cursed in church. He wasn't done. "I earned this," he said, voice rising. "All my life, I've worked hard. I never took handouts. And I sure as heck won't start now, especially from someone like Rochelle." My full name hit the air like a slap. He didn't look at me, but I knew who someone like Rochelle was meant for. The West Coast liberal, the lesbian daughter, the disappointment. Then B, my cousin, 28, sarcastic, unapologetic, leaned into Marina and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Did she really deserve that?" And I just sat there, smiling. Not because it didn't hurt. Not because I was proud. But because the irony of it all was so sharp, so surgical, it almost felt like poetry. He didn't know. Didn't know I was the one who vouched for him. Funded the program. Wrote the letter that said, "He's passionate. He's committed. He just needs a chance." He didn't know he'd already accepted a dime from me. Heck, he'd accepted thousands. I stood slowly, walked over to the drinks table, poured myself another glass of sweet tea. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I turned back to the crowd and said, "Well, I'm just glad someone believed in you." He froze. Everyone else turned to look. "I recommended you," I said. "For the job. Funded the project that made the position possible. They didn't know we were related. I just thought you deserved another shot." A hush fell over the entire reunion. Someone dropped a plate. He blinked. Swallowed. "No. You're lying." "I'm not," I said simply. Marina cleared her throat. "She told me, weeks ago." I knew. He looked around, suddenly unsure of the ground he stood on. "I didn't ask for your help," he muttered. "You didn't need to," I said. "You already got it." And then I sat back down. The tea was cold. The sun had dipped. The lights around us twinkled like 1,000 small truths no one wanted to say aloud. Dad said nothing more that night. Everyone else scrambled to fill the silence. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. People tried to move on, pretending the moment hadn't happened. Aunt Loretta started fussing over dessert, cutting the cake like it was the glue that could hold the whole evening together. Marina started handing out paper plates. My Uncle Russ began telling a tired story about a flat tire on I-40 like it was the funniest thing that ever happened. But no one really laughed. Not this time. Dad disappeared for a while. No one knew where he went. Naomi sat beside me, quietly peeling the label off a beer bottle. She didn't say much, just leaned her shoulder against mine in a quiet gesture of support. She'd always known how to say the right thing by saying nothing at all. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was just tired. It's a strange thing, how your expectations can recalibrate over the years. How you can spend most of your adult life preparing for someone to fail you, only to still feel a sting when they finally do. Not because it hurts in the same way it used to, but because you realize you're still holding on to something you thought you let go of. I didn't expect my dad to thank me. I didn't even want him to know. But the venom in his voice when he said my name, that part still had a bite. Like I was a shameful burden. A stain on his pride. Naomi finally broke the silence between us. "He didn't mean it." I looked at her. He said it loud enough to mean it. "He's old school, Ro. You know that. He's been isolated. He hasn't grown the way you have. It's not right. I'm not excusing it. But he's stuck. Like he's frozen in time, trying to prove something to no one. I don't need him to catch up, I said. But I'm done shrinking for him. She nodded. Good. You shouldn't. People started filtering out around dusk. Cars pulled out slowly down the gravel road, kids trailing behind with melted popsicles and tired eyes. The fairy lights buzzed faintly overhead as the night finally took hold. I helped Marina collect paper plates and toss them into the trash bags. She paused near the empty cake table. I wanted this to be better, she said, more to herself than to me. I know. Do you regret coming? I thought about it. No. I think I needed to see it for what it is. He's proud. Too proud. I think he thought you'd gloat. I scoffed. Gloating would have been showing him the receipts. We both laughed, quiet, tired laughter. The kind that comes at the end of something unresolved. Just as I was getting ready to leave, I saw Dad again. He was sitting alone on the back porch of the lodge, looking out over the trees. A drink in hand. His posture heavy. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. This wasn't a movie. There wasn't going to be some last-minute embrace. He wasn't going to whisper that he was proud of me. He wasn't going to thank me. I didn't want to give him the chance to make it worse. Instead, I headed to my rental car, loaded up my things, and sat for a moment before turning the key. Then I saw movement in the rearview mirror, Naomi jogging up. You okay? She asked, leaning into the open window. I will be. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He asked me to give you this. Didn't want to do it in front of anyone. I hesitated. Should I read it now? Up to you. She tapped the car twice and walked away. I sat there for another minute before unfolding the paper. The handwriting was tight, slanted, unmistakably his. Rochelle, I didn't know. That makes me feel worse, not better. I know we've lost time. I've said things I can't take back. I'm not sure what this is. Or what it means. But I'm writing. That has to count for something. Dennis, no apology. No recognition of who I was. Just a crack in the door. Barely. It was more than I ever expected. And far less than I deserved. But it was something. I kept the letter. Not because it meant everything, but because it meant something. I folded it neatly, tucked it into the side pocket of my suitcase, and didn't look at it again for days. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't quite know what to do with it. I flew back to San Francisco the next morning. The cool, fog-slicked air that met me outside San Francisco airport was jarringly different from the warm, sticky summer back home. That's the thing about distance, both geographical and emotional. You think you can leave things behind, and then one letter, one sentence, pulls the whole history up from beneath your ribs. The following weeks were busy, like they always were. My team was prepping for a new round of funding for a healthcare tech startup. I was mentoring a young founder who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, sharp, guarded, desperately trying to outrun something invisible. Life in venture capital didn't leave much room for dwelling. But then the first postcard arrived. It was from Charleston. The front showed a crumbling Confederate monument surrounded by scaffolding. On the back, just one line, "You were right." The story's more complicated than I thought. No signature, but I didn't need one. A week later, another came. This one showed the old Slave Mart Museum. I'm learning. Slowly. And then, every week after that, another card. Each one handwritten, brief, never sentimental. But always carrying the same underlying current, I'm trying. It confused me. Because that wasn't the father I knew. The father I knew didn't try. He stood firm. He made decisions like they were moral certainties. He didn't revisit, revise, or retreat. Especially not for me. At first, I didn't respond. Not out of spite, out of hesitation. Because what was I supposed to say? Thanks for the effort? Glad you're finally realizing I'm a person? Instead, I watched the cards stack up on my desk. I'd lay them out like breadcrumbs across the wood grain. Like I was tracing the path of someone who didn't know how to find their way home, but was at least walking. Then, one Thursday afternoon in late July, I got a call from Naomi. "Dad's back in Asheville," she said. "He finished the first phase of the project. He's different." I didn't answer right away. "He asked about you." I laughed dryly. "Yeah? What did he say? How's the family embarrassment doing in California?" "No. He asked if you were still married to Isabel." My stomach twisted a little. "We've been divorced 3 years." He knew that. He forgot. He's been writing this list of regrets. I saw it on his kitchen table. "You were on it." "Not in the way you think." I sighed. "Naomi. I don't know what he wants from me. Maybe he doesn't know either. But he asked me to tell you he'd like to talk." A pause. Not argue. Not explain. Just talk. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no, either. It took me another 3 weeks before I booked the ticket. I didn't tell anyone. Not Naomi. Not even my assistant. I took 3 personal days, cleared my schedule, and flew back without an agenda. He was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside Asheville now. Downsized from the old house. The new place was modest, but tidy. Bookshelves lined with history volumes, folders of research notes, a dusty guitar in the corner I didn't even know he still had. He opened the door slowly, like he didn't quite believe I was there. "Hi," I said. He blinked. "Hi." We stood there for a moment, unsure of how to shrink the distance between us. Then he stepped aside. "Come in." The living room smelled like paper and black coffee. There was a soft hum from a box fan in the window. Everything felt frozen in time, like he hadn't changed a thing since the late 90s, except that now, instead of judgment, there was something quieter in the air. Hesitation, maybe. We didn't sit right away. I hovered near the bookshelf. He hovered by the dining table. "I've been reading," he said eventually. "A lot. Things I should have read a long time ago." "I got your postcards," I said. He smiled faintly. "Didn't know if you'd read them." I shrugged. "Didn't know if you'd send them." That got a soft chuckle. We finally sat. 2 cups of black coffee between us. No cream, no sugar, just like he used to drink it when we took road trips to Greensboro, back when I was 12 and still his shadow. He leaned back, eyes on the window. I said something unforgivable that night. I didn't answer. He looked at me then. Really looked. I know what I said. I know what it meant. "And you meant it," I replied, flatly. I did, in the moment. Because I didn't know how to sit with my own shame. That caught me off guard. I didn't know how to process the idea that you did something for me that I didn't feel I deserved. And instead of saying thank you, I tried to make you feel small. Because I felt small. I watched him carefully. He continued. "You were always 10 steps ahead of me. Brave when I was a coward. Open when I shut everything down. That's not the father I knew," I said. "I know. I know what kind of father I was." We sat in silence again. Then he pulled something from the drawer. A thick file folder. Letters, printouts, articles. His notes on the Charleston project. I thought if I immersed myself in the past, I'd find some justification for the way I acted. But instead, I found stories about people who changed. Who saw themselves for the first time when they had nothing left to protect. He tapped the folder. I've been doing the same. I didn't cry. I didn't offer him forgiveness. But I stayed. For 2 hours, we talked. About history. About Naomi. About how different the world is now. About how he feels both out of place and fascinated by everything he missed. He didn't ask for absolution. And I didn't give it. But when I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. And this time, he said my name, not as an accusation, not as a disappointment, but as a person. Rochelle. I turned. Thank you, he said. For giving me a job. For giving me purpose. Even if I was too proud to see it. I nodded. Then, after a long pause, I said, "You have a long way to go." I know. But I'm listening, I added. For now. He smiled. Then I'll keep writing. The postcards kept coming. At first, every week. Then, every couple. Always handwritten. Always sincere, in his own awkward way. Over time, they started including things that surprised me, like books he was reading on queer history, articles about LGBTQ+ activists from the South, even underlined passages from James Baldwin with notes like, "This reminds me of something you said once, maybe I was listening more than you thought." I never wrote back. But I kept every single one. I wasn't sure what I wanted from him. An apology? A reckoning? Maybe. But more than anything, I wanted him to feel the absence I'd carried for years. I wanted him to sit with the ache of what he'd missed. That was the difference between forgiveness and consequence. I didn't want to punish him. I wanted him to understand what he'd lost. That was the revenge. The quiet, patient kind. Then came the second offer. I'd gotten a call from the board chair at the Charleston Heritage Society. They were expanding the project. The consulting work Dad had been doing had gone well. In fact, better than expected. They wanted to bring him on in a more official capacity, project lead. He'd be overseeing a new team, handling grants, managing historical narratives with broader inclusion efforts. It was a big deal. And they wanted me to weigh in. "Would you be comfortable continuing to back this?" the chair had asked, cautiously. "It's a delicate dynamic, I know." I said yes. And then I made a few calls. This time, it wouldn't be anonymous. 2 weeks later, Dennis was invited back to Charleston for a formal reception celebrating the project's expansion. A cocktail event at a historic site turned community center. Marina came. Naomi came too. Even some local press was invited. I showed up in a navy pantsuit, clean-cut, understated, my usual armor. The moment he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Not panic, acceptance, maybe. Or nerves. We exchanged brief, formal hellos. During the reception, the board chair stood up and gave a speech about how the project had been a success thanks to bold, sometimes difficult, but ultimately healing collaborations. Then she introduced Dennis. He gave a short speech. Grateful, measured. Talked about reclaiming history, facing uncomfortable truths, and the responsibility of those who had once turned away from those truths. It was probably the most humility I'd ever heard in his voice. And then the chairwoman called me up. "Tonight, we also want to thank one of our founding supporters, someone whose belief in this program, and in Dennis, made it possible from the beginning." There were murmurs. Dennis turned slowly, watching me walk up. I stood beside him, smiled at the crowd, and took the mic. "I'd like to say a few words," I began. "Years ago, I left this part of the country feeling like there wasn't space for someone like me. But I came back because I believed there could be. That people can grow. That even if it takes them longer than we want, some do eventually get there." I paused. Looked out at the audience, and then at my father. I took a risk supporting this project because I thought it might be the only way for two people, who hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, to build something together, even if they didn't know they were doing it. A few people nodded. A few looked confused. I also did it, I added, because I knew that, deep down, Dennis was capable of doing better. Of being better. He just needed someone else to believe in him before he believed in himself. I turned to him and smiled, warmly but with weight. And I hope he never forgets who that person was. He blinked. Mouth slightly open. He didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. He just absorbed it. Everyone clapped politely. I handed the mic back and walked off the stage, head high, pulse calm. That was my moment. Not just the truth laid bare in public, but watching my father, proud, quiet, successful in the thing he most valued, knowing he would never again be able to pretend I didn't make it possible. Knowing he had to wear that knowledge like a second skin for the rest of his life. That was the revenge. No cruelty. No cruelty needed. Just the subtle, irreversible shift of power. Later that night, as the event wound down, he approached me on the side terrace. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. I wouldn't have gotten here without you. I nodded. I know. He hesitated. Do you hate me? I thought about it. No. But I did. For a long time. And now? Now. I don't owe you anything. But you owe me honesty. I can give you that. Then we'll see. We stood there for a long time. No hug. No big gesture. Just the soft sounds of a southern evening and two people who finally knew where they stood. I walked away first. And this time, he didn't stop me. But he watched me go. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed his approval. Because I had something better.